In this tutorial, you'll learn how to make this landscape. It's all very simple. All it consists of is a plane, a single tree that's been multiplied a number of times, and some particles. And we'll learn how to use the Blender particle system to quickly fill out an object like this to make it look like it's densely populated. So we'll also learn how to make a camera follow a path. So you can see here is the camera icon, and there's this curvy line through the landscape, and what I've done is to set it up so that camera follows this path through the forest. So when we go to the camera view, we get this sort of first-person perspective of the camera going through the landscape. Okay, so that's our goal. So first of all, I'm going to start a brand new one, and I'm just going to make sure that saves anything is changed to save there. I'm going to delete the cube, and we're going to start by putting in our basic landscape. So we go up here to add mesh plane. Now, when you add in an object, you get some options down in this bottom left-hand corner. If you open up that, we can straight away change the size. Let's change this to 50 meters squared. All right, and I've just zoomed out, and now we've got a nice big area to build our landscape on. What we're going to do is straight away, let's apply a material to that. I always name my materials. Let's call this forest floor, and some sort of a greenish material, and scroll down and change the roughness up to 1, which means it won't reflect the light. So when we go up here to this setting here where we can change our different views, this is just the plain object view, and here we get a bit of a preview of what the final image will look like. We can see our color applied. Okay, let's go into edit mode. You can go up here to select edit mode, or you can just simply select tab. And in tab, in edit mode, what I want you to do is to make sure that everything is selected. So if you press A, it selects everything in the object. If you right click, it comes up with this menu. We're going to select subdivide from this menu. And down here, we're going to increase. This is just cutting up our plane into many, many vertices. Let's go, it goes up to 10 on those arrows, and then you've got to double click. Let's see what 20 looks like. I might even go 30. That is going to be very good for what we want to do. So add in 30 subdivisions. Okay, once that's done, you can tab to go back into object mode, or just change it up here. So now we've got a pretty simple looking plane, but all those vertices that we've added to it, they're going to come in useful later on. Okay, there's also this light here. We don't need that light right now. Automatically, it's put in what's called a point light. We're going to later on change that to a sun. So don't worry about the light right now. We're going to build a tree. So we're going to go, make sure you're in object mode, add, mesh, cube. And once again, down in this menu here, it gives us the option to set the size. So why don't we just go 1? Okay. Let's zoom in on that. We can just move it up a little bit so we can see what we're working with. All right, this is going to be our tree. We're going to make a very simple looking pine tree, and using some techniques that we've learned in the previous activities as well. So we're going to go to tab, and I'm going to go to face select mode. You can also just hit number 3. We're going to select that top face there of the cube. Come down here to your different tools, and we are going to extrude. So click on extrude, go over here and just grab that little plus and just lift it up a little bit. Okay, not too much. Then we're going to go scale. So that's this option here. And if you grab that white circle there, click and grab and pull it outwards, it's going to start to make that much bigger. Okay, so that's basically going to be the base of our pine tree. So around about there. What's that? That's maybe 4 times the size of the cube there. So then we're going to extrude once more. So up it goes. Now, and that should be about right. And then we're going to go back to scale and just pull in the top there. Don't pull it in all the way. It's okay if there's a little space left there on the top. If you pull it in too far, it'll look a little bit funny. Okay, so that's our basic pine tree shape. We want a little bit of variety in our pine trees. So what we want to do is to create a cut through this. So I've just selected the loop cut tool, and if you click and then drag your mouse up or down, or your keypad up and down, your touchpad up and down, you can change where that cut is. So we want that cut to be around about in the middle, and then I'm going to go over to the move tool, and we're just going to move it like that, just so it's putting a nice little bend in the tree, and that will help to give all of our trees a little bit of variation, so they don't all look exactly the same. All right, you can put a couple cuts in the tree if you wanted to, so maybe one more up the top there, and once again you can bend it that way or that way. That might be a little bit interesting. Okay, so that's our basic pine tree. Let's go back to object mode. I've just pressed tab, and let's apply some colors to this. So down here in the materials, we go new. Let's call this one pine tree leaves. Press enter, and down here select a nice deep green color. So it's very different to the forest floor color that we had before. Once again, we don't want this pine tree to be reflecting light. We don't want it to be shiny, so make the roughness all the way up. Okay, so then what we want to do is to color the trunk. So let's scroll back up here, and we hit the little plus button, plus, click new, and let's call this new one pine tree trunk. And we want that to be a nice dark brown. That'll be nice. And again, we don't want it to be reflective, so let's lift up the roughness. Okay, now to apply that color to the trunk, we need to go back into edit mode. So go tab, and in face select, so I've selected the face mode, or you can press number 3. I'm going to go click, and then hold down shift, click, holding shift, click, holding shift again, click, and don't really need to do that bottom one, but why not? Okay, so we've selected all the trunk faces. Come over here to your materials, click pine tree trunk, and assign. Okay, and so now we've got not a bad looking low poly pine tree. Okay, so let's achieve just that much now. In this next step, we will make this tree distribute itself around the plane that we have here. So I want you to click on the plane. Actually, before we go further, something very important that we've got to do last time was to apply the scale. So whenever we've done anything to an object that changes its size, we need to go up here to Object, Apply Scale. And that will just sort of help Blender to keep track of things and stop it from doing anything a little bit unusual later on down the line. Okay, so let's click on the plane. I want you to go over here to this setting. This is our particle settings. So click on that and hit plus and change this to pine tree. All right, select hair, and straight away you'll see lots of hair has grown out of our forest floor there. Also click advanced. 1,000 means there's going to be 1,000 objects when we finally select our tree as our object. That's going to be way too many, so we might say, why don't we try 200? All right, so 200 trees spread through there. Even that might be a little bit too much. Why don't we try 150? We'll see how that goes. All right, so first of all, what we can do is this hair length option. We can just bring that up a little bit, and that's going to be the general height of the trees. We will adjust that a little bit later as well. Some of these options we can ignore. Click on rotation, and we'll come back and adjust those shortly. Down here where it says render, so you might have to open up these options here. Where it says render as, I want you to click on that, go down to object, and scroll down a little bit further. And then here you can use this little dropper tool. If you click on that and then go over to your tree and click that, it will then put lots and lots of those trees wherever those hairs were. So what I've done is I've changed my tree up here. I've just double clicked on that to add the name pine tree, and I've also changed the name of the plane to forest floor, just to help me keep track of my objects a little bit better. Okay, so back to our particle settings. Now we can see all the trees are arranged lying down, and that's a little bit funny. So Blender does make this a little bit difficult for us. Where we've chosen the object, so that box is ticked object scale, also click object rotation. What we have to do is a little bit of fiddling around here. Let's click on the tree, and we're going to rotate it and try to see if that will, see, that's right. So I'm just rotating it that way, and for some reason it's making the trees stand up the right way. Okay, so to make sure that you're rotating it exactly enough, you can click on the object properties button here, and you can see it's rotating along the y-axis, and if you typed in 90, it would rotate exactly 90 degrees. All right, now all those trees have been distributed. They're a little bit small, so what we can do, click on the plane, go back to the particle settings, and we want them to be a little bit bigger. So we want to change the scale here. So when I slide up the scale, it makes them bigger, and then we can add some variation to that. So I'm sliding up random as well. And then we've got lots of different shaped trees there. Okay, try that for your next step. We will now tell Blender exactly where we want the trees to be distributed. So we're going to do what's called weight painting. Change the mode to weight paint mode. And then go to a top-down view. And up here is where you set how much weight you want to apply. So we're basically now painting the vertices that we created before when we were adding subdivisions to the plane. So we're painting over and marking all of those vertices, and this is telling Blender that this area is where we want the trees to be distributed to. So this is called a vertex group that we're making right now. So click on this icon here, and under vertex groups, you can just change the name to pine trees. That'll make it easier to find shortly. Okay, so we're going to go back to the particles, and scrolling down, where we come to the section down here called vertex groups, next to density, we can click on that and then click pine trees. And you can see straight away, Blender has distributed those pine trees exactly where we've painted. That middle section there, we want a nice clear pathway through the middle of this forest. So you can just make sure that no trees are getting in the way of that middle pathway. So if you take the weight all the way down to 0 and make your radius of your weight paint brush a little bit smaller, you can paint a nice clear path through the middle, and then just fix up anything else. And you can see the particles are moving around as you do the painting. Okay, so that looks pretty good. That's fine. What we might do is add a few more trees. So up to 200 trees, and you could add even more if you wanted to, but that's fine for now. So it's looking pretty good. We can now start to add a bit more variety by clicking on the rotation option and just increasing these two values of phase and randomize. And that's making each tree pretty much change its rotation. Sometimes this value randomize does add a little bit more variation, but it doesn't seem to be working this time. So now the trees are all facing a slightly different way to each other. Don't worry that the trees are overlapping each other. We've got this little funny issue of the tree trunks below the plane. We can fix it up. Click on the original pine tree, go to edit mode, and select that bottom face. So go to mesh and snap and cursor to selected. Okay. Then what we want to do is to change the origin. If we go back to object mode and object, set origin to 3D cursor. There we go. And that's fixed up that little issue there. Now all the trees are definitely sitting on the plane and they're not sinking below it. Save your work whenever you do anything that's a little bit demanding. We don't want to lose all that work that you've done. We're going to add in a new particle system. So go back to Particles, Plus, and name this new particle system Grass. And once again, we're going to use the hair particle system. We won't need rotation for this one, so don't worry about clicking on Advance. But let's make these hair particles just about the length of the pine tree trunks there. So it's going to be clumps of long grass that we're creating. We want that grass to be a different colour to the forest floor, so we can add in a new material, and we can call this one grass. And I'm going to make this grass a slightly brownish colour, maybe sort of dried out grass a little bit. We don't want it to be reflective, so take the roughness value all the way up and go back to particle settings. And now next to material, choose grass. And eventually when we see it rendered, it'll be that nice brown colour. Go down here to children and click on simple, and this will help Blender to add in a few more grass particles. So if you just change the render amount to 10, otherwise it'll be way too many. Just change this value here of radius. That will just make the grass particles just move away from each other a little bit. And here with clump, if we bring that value down to the negatives, it clumps the grass together at its base. And then you can fool around with this value here of twist and shape, getting something kind of organic looking, kind of natural looking. Once you're happy with your results, you can try that clump noise as well, see if you like that result. But there, we've got now lots of grass. Let's now set up a new vertex group so that we can tell Blender where we want the grass to be distributed. So click on Weight Paint once more. Check the option that brings up our vertex groups and click plus. And we're going to create a new vertex group and change this one to grass. And now what we want to do is basically paint in where we want the grass. So I'm using a fairly small radius there, and the weight's all the way up to 100%. I'm just scribbling in where I want the grass to be distributed. It's okay to leave a few little bare patches, but what I'd like is for the grass to run alongside the pathway that we will eventually see in our final version. So just making some dense lines along there. And if we go back to our object mode and then the particle settings again, make sure you're actually on the grass particle settings that you've created. Go down to vertex groups, click density, and now click grass. And we can see that the grass has now been distributed where we've told it to. So we've created a nice scene here. You might want to try increasing that. That 1,000 is already enough. Save your work, and let's get that far in your project.